Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to go over kind of some of the recent updates going on in the overall crypto market, because kind of what we're seeing right now is a little bit a sense of like kind of a tale of two markets. And so I want to kind of discuss that a little bit further, look at kind of what may have caused that, and then also some of these new events that will be unfolding in potentially as soon as like the next 24 hours, and how this could affect Bitcoin going on through November and into the end of the year. So anyway, let's go on ahead and dive right in. So starting out, what we can see here on crypto bubbles is it's been a very red day, and we've actually seen a pretty aggressive pullback on Bitcoin and kind of everything else in the market. And you can kind of see that here. You know, everything's down a pretty decent amount on the day. If we look at the week, again, you know, the week has flipped to red just like we saw yesterday. And then this is actually the first time we've seen the month flip to red. And so obviously we still do have, you know, a couple pretty like green bubbles here, but overall, as I was mentioning yesterday, like there's a lot of like pretty deep red things here. Like this is not at all been a good month for altcoins. And we're actually going to take a look at that here in a second, because we're kind of sitting in a little bit of a tale of two markets. And kind of as I mentioned in my October video that I made a couple weeks ago, I did think that there was a possibility of this happening. I didn't necessarily maybe expect the market to kind of fork as hard as it has, because I think that's definitely what we've seen. But I mean, this definitely was an outcome, and I think it kind of makes a lot of sense based on what a lot of people were expecting for October being Uptober kind of more generally. And so we'll go into that a little bit. But moving on, what we can see is the crypto fear and greed index does stay in greed. If we want to cut this down to a shorter time frame, we can see we've been in greed essentially for the past 2 weeks or so, a little bit past that, and everything is just kind of been staying up in this greed area. I don't think we've actually hit extreme greed yet. Now we're just sitting kind of in greed more generally, but I would imagine that this probably starts to move into extreme greed as soon as we start to see altcoins move, because what we haven't really seen too much so far is altcoins. I mean, altcoins have kind of really gone down more than Bitcoin has gone up, which has been a little bit surprising. And so this is, I think, maybe causing like there's a general sense of greed and euphoria in the market concerning Bitcoin and where the market's at currently, kind of, I guess, future casting what we're hoping to see. But altcoins themselves have kind of gotten wrecked. But overall, if we want to look at just the Bitcoin chart, what we can see over the past several days, I mean, we've seen a very aggressive move to the upside, and then we have actually pulled back pretty massively today. We are sitting around 70,500. We are above this kind of most recent lower high, I guess we could call it, but we have pulled back from kind of I guess this previous lower high before that. And so what we can see now is we have started to kind of recover a little bit on the RSI. The RSI is moving down, which we have seen this in the past. Remember, you know, even just a little bit of recovery, even if we don't fall too much further from here, but we just kind of settle here and create a little bit of a support, this could be possible. I also do think, you know, it's something where we kind of come back to this like 68,000 range and we kind of bounce off of this support. Kind of as I mentioned in my video a couple days ago, this to me is not at all surprising. It wouldn't actually even be surprising if like we came all the way back here, or maybe even bounced off of this like descending channel again, just because before we see a pretty dramatic move to the upside, I do think like we would want to kind of catch some of these liquidations on the way down and kind of cause a little bit more fear in the market, at least looking at the upside, before we actually do kind of make that move breaking all-time highs. And so what we can see is if we do look at the Bitcoin levels, we can see on the daily, we actually have come back down to liquidating shorts, indicating a possible move to the upside. But the 7 and 30 day do continue to be favoring a move to the downside and liquidating longs. If we can see, you know, there is a pretty decent bit of volume relatively close to where the price is now. A move down to like that 68,000 range would liquidate over 2 billion, at least where we're sitting currently. And then looking at the 30 day, you know, a lot of it's kind of lower down, kind of like below the 65, or probably like 65,500 range, but still a decent chunk to be liquidated, even if we come back down to like 68.3, 68.5, which I do think is very much a possibility. What I am looking to see overall is kind of start to see this even out. We may not see it kind of as tilted as it might be to the upside before we start to move up, but I think at least evening out. What we can see here on the 7 days, it started to even out a little bit more. And then obviously on the 1 day, we have seen it flip. And so, you know, this is something that I think this kind of makes sense, and we can see this overall. The other thing I wanted to take a look at is the Bitcoin returns history, and this kind of gets into the larger question that we're looking at right now, which is, how did October go? What do we expect for November? And what what do we kind of have potentially looking ahead? So what we can see is for Bitcoin, so far we've done 11% in Q4, and that obviously is just October so far. October, the pattern has held for October, at least concerning Bitcoin. And so, we can see up 11%. There's only been 2 times in history that October has not been the case. It does look like this will continue, particularly if we look at the chart. Obviously looking really, really strong for Bitcoin. We would need to see some pretty crazy crash down to, because I think we started October at it was 63,279. So we need to see a pretty ridiculous move back in the next couple hours to actually not have Bitcoin close higher than what it did at the beginning of October. So I would say October is basically kind of confirmed at this point. However, what we have seen that's a little bit different is within the alt market. And so we'll check that out here in a second. Before we do that, I did want to tell you guys about Margex. I do use Margex basically for all of my trading. I did take a couple trades kind of on this way up. I did miss the trade coming back just because it kind of happened a little bit quicker than what I thought it might. But overall, it's a great platform for leverage trading. There's no KYC, no VPN. You just don't need to give anybody your information. You just get signed up and you can start trading. They also do have up to a $10,000 deposit bonus if that's something you're interested in. If you are interested, please just check out the link in my description below. You can go ahead and get started trading. They do up to 100x leverage Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then a little bit lower on some of the smaller alts. But overall, it's been a really good platform. I've enjoyed using it so far. So if you are looking to kind of do a little bit more leverage trading and you're interested in getting into it, feel free just to check out that link in the description. So going back to alts, what I wanted to take a look at is a chart of the total crypto market cap excluding Bitcoin. So basically everything else that's not Bitcoin is marked in this chart. And what we can see so far is, even though we have seen, going back to Margex, we've seen a very, very nice move to the upside in October for Bitcoin. It's been almost exactly the opposite for basically anything not called Bitcoin, right? I know we've had a couple isolated instances of success here. I know Solana has done relatively well. There have been some meme coins that have done relatively well, but the alt market in general has not actually done well in October. And so it is close. I mean, it's only a relatively slight move downward, but it is moved down nonetheless, unless we see some, pretty aggressive pump by the end of today. Probably not something that we're not going to see October for the alts. This is something, and kind of what going with the video that I released a couple weeks ago. This is, I think, kind of maybe not too unexpected to me. Bitcoin going up so dramatically, frankly, was a little bit unexpected. I figured prior to the U.S. election we weren't going to see any major moves, and also generally when there's something that's just so consensus within the market, it usually doesn't end up playing out that way. And so the fact that Bitcoin has moved up so dramatically was a little bit of a surprise. And maybe you say I'm crazy just looking at the returns history, but usually when we see something like that, people expect this, and so other people will play the market the other way. However, looking at alts, this is kind of more of what I expected, right? Maybe not necessarily a massive move down, but definitely a move down after a whole bunch of choppiness within the month. That is kind of something more of what I expected. And what we can see is we did start the month at about a $929 billion market cap of all alts not called Bitcoin, and currently we are sitting right at about 920 billion. So about 9 billion less, not a whole lot, not really too bad from kind of what we were seeing, or what we have seen in some alts specifically, but just the overall market it has come down a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I do think that the market does actually remain to be in a pretty decent position. What we can see is there is kind of a general level of resistance at this kind of 980 to maybe 965 range. So that it does seem to be a level of resistance here. I do think that we'll probably break this relatively easily. But I think we need some kind of better news in the market before that happens. And also I do think, Bitcoin will kind of lead the way here. And so, we may not see the altcoin market break that 980 kind of cap that we've seen so far until maybe we see new all-time highs out of Bitcoin. And so that's something just to kind of consider and take a look at. Over these next couple of days, there's a lot going on that's going to be very, very consequential for Bitcoin and kind of the crypto market as a whole. One of the things that we're seeing particularly is a potential leak coming out of China about a $1.4 trillion stimulus China's economy, for those of you who aren't too aware, China's economy has been in a pretty precarious situation over the past probably 6 months or so. And so they've been taking increasingly like ridiculous and dramatic measures to try and stop their economy from having like a complete and total economic meltdown. And so what we're seeing here with this $1.4 trillion stimulus injection, I think this is 3 or 4 times larger than the next largest like stimulus injection that they've ever done. And so this is something that obviously is like a really, really massive event. And what we can see is it's going to be voted on anywhere between November 4th and November 8th. So if you are trying to buy more Bitcoin using like one of the ETFs, you've got like 2 hours to do so. Otherwise, if they do end up meeting on Monday, it sounds like they might be meeting on the 8th. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if they do end up meeting on Monday, that's kind of the only chance probably to get in before we see some of that news. If they end up meeting on the 8th, you've probably got Monday or Tuesday next week in order to do that. Otherwise, you obviously can trade crypto 24/7 as long as it's not in an ETF and you're just buying it kind of straight up. But what we can see here is, a decent bit of stimulus we've seen so far. And there's a lot of people kind of within the overall finance industry that still think more fiscal stimulus is coming from China specifically. And then, depending on what that does, maybe we see something, coming from the US, depending on how the US economy looks. We have seen yield rates invert. And usually when yield rates invert, especially to the degree that they have so far, there's usually some level of correction or pullback that comes. And so, there's a lot of things that are kind of setting up for a potential massive move to the upside for Bitcoin. We got to think, we got increased liquidity, the possibility of a pro-crypto president being elected. We've got the continued rumors that China is considering unbanning crypto in Q4. Q4 is quickly drawing to a close. And so, this could also happen potentially in November. There's a lot of various things that are going on in the market, all of which would actually be very bullish for Bitcoin and then crypto more generally. The liquidity injections, this obviously will be good for Bitcoin probably to start, but it will very much flow into the altcoin market. And so right now, obviously we're sitting at about that 920 billion range. I mean, we could be seeing $1, $2, $3 trillion by the end of this next bull run. Probably 2 or 3 trillion is kind of what looks to make the most sense and what seems to be kind of the most likely outcome, but who knows? I mean, it's really hard to say, especially depending on kind of what level of liquidity injections we get and things like that. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. I'm trying to continue to get pushed in, further into the YouTube algorithm, and your guys' support and interaction really, really does help me with that. Also, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, please feel free to just drop in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of them. So if you want me to see anything or want to get in touch with me, that's probably the best way to do that. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.